The voice came sharp and public, cutting through the cabin like a snapped cable. Miss put the phone down. Now. Every head in the first 2 rows turned. The overhead lights hummed. Somewhere, a glass clinked against a tray table. Grace Williams did not move. She was 16. Slim. Still wearing the school hoodie she had slept in because it felt like home. Her phone rested flat in her palm. Screen dark fingers, still. She looked up slowly, not startled, just tired, and met the flight attendant's eyes. "I'm not recording," Grace said. Her voice was quiet, steady. American flat. "I'm texting my mother." The attendant exhaled through her nose, the sound sharp with irritation. Her name tag read, Helen Moore. Late 40s, hair pulled tight. The kind of posture that came from years of enforcing rules without being questioned. "You don't get to decide that," Helen said. "Federal regulations apply to everyone on this aircraft." A man in the aisle seat beside Grace shifted uncomfortably. He was in his late 60s. Clean jacket, hands folded, eyes down. He did not look at Grace. He did not look at Helen. He stared at the seat back like it could swallow him. Grace felt the familiar pressure behind her ribs. Not fear. Not yet. Something older. Something learned. The weight of being noticed for the wrong reason. "I'm allowed to text until the doors close," Grace said. She knew the rule. Her mother had drilled it into her the way she drilled everything. Know the policy before someone uses it against you. Helen's smile was thin. Not when a passenger reports suspicious behavior. That word landed hard. Suspicious. A woman 2 rows up leaned into the aisle. Her pearl earrings catching the light. "I saw her holding the phone up," she said too quickly. Pointed toward the cockpit. Grace turned her head. The woman would not meet her eyes. The plane was still at the gate. Engines off, air stale. The smell of recycled air and cologne sat heavy. Outside the window, a fuel truck rolled past, slow and indifferent. Grace lowered her phone and slid it into her hoodie pocket. She could feel her heart beat now. Slow. Controlled. She had learned that too. Do not rush. Do not react. "Thank you," Helen said, already turning away. "Let's keep things calm." Calm. Grace watched the woman's back retreat down the aisle. Watched the shoulders relax now that control had been asserted. She leaned her head back and closed her eyes for half a second. This was not how the day was supposed to begin. An hour earlier, Grace had stood alone at the gate at Logan Airport, backpack at her feet, watching the early morning crowd move like a tired tide. Business travelers, retired couples, a group of teenagers laughing too loud, already late for something. Grace had been early. She was always early. Her boarding pass read first class, row 1. Window. Her mother had sent it to her the night before with a short message. "Don't argue with anyone. Just get on the plane. I'll meet you in Seattle." Grace had stared at the screen for a long time. She had not asked how. She had not asked why. She had learned not to ask certain questions unless invited. At the gate, a young agent scanned her pass, twice brows knitting. Traveling alone? He asked. Yes, Grace said. He looked at her again, then smiled too wide. Enjoy the upgrade. It's not an upgrade, Grace said, before she could stop herself. The agent paused, then waved her through. Now seated in the wide leather chair that smelled faintly of citrus cleaner, Grace felt none of the comfort it promised. She could feel eyes on her, curious, assessing, some annoyed, some openly disapproving. Behind her, a man muttered, "Kids these days." Grace's fingers curled into the sleeve of her hoodie. She focused on sound instead, the rustle of newspapers, the low beep of an overhead bin, the click of a watch clasp. Across the aisle, a woman in her early 30s leaned forward, pretending to adjust her bag. Her eyes flicked to Grace's face, then away. Her mouth tightened, as if she wanted to say something and decided not to. Grace wondered which was worse. Helen returned, tablet in hand. She stopped at Grace's row, blocking the aisle again. "We're going to need to verify your information," she said, voice lowered but firm. "Please remain seated." Grace opened her eyes. "Is there a problem?" Helen glanced at the tablet. "There's been some confusion." That word again. Confusion. It was always confusion. "What kind?" Grace asked. Helen did not answer right away. She tapped the screen once, twice. Her jaw tightened. "Your reservation was flagged," she said finally. Flagged. Grace felt a chill move up her spine. For what? Helen looked up, eyes sharp now. For review. A man across the aisle let out a quiet laugh, the kind meant for himself. "Here we go," he said under his breath. Grace leaned forward slightly. "My ticket is paid for," she said. "My name is on it." Helen's lips pressed together. "That may be, but until we resolve this, you need to remain compliant." The word compliant landed heavier than suspicious. Grace had heard it before. At school, at the courthouse downtown where her mother worked long hours, in rooms where adults decided what kind of person you were before you spoke. Grace glanced toward the front of the plane. The cockpit door was closed. A faint line of light glowed beneath it. Somewhere beyond that door, decisions were being made without her. She thought of her mother's voice, calm, precise. Never give them more than they deserve. Never less than the truth. "Can I call her?" Grace asked. Helen shook her head. "Phones stay off." "They're not off yet," Grace said. She kept her tone even. "We're still at the gate." Helen's eyes flashed. "I said no." Silence rippled outward. A few passengers shifted. Someone coughed. The man beside Grace finally looked at her, then at Helen, then back at his hands. Grace felt something else now. Not fear. Not shame. Resolve. It settled in her chest like a locked door. "Then I'd like to know why I'm being singled out," Grace said. Helen straightened. Her voice dropped dangerous and controlled. "Because when something feels off, we take it seriously." Grace held her gaze. What feels off? For a split second, Helen hesitated. It was small, almost invisible. But Grace saw it. The pause where the truth and assumption brushed shoulders. Behind them a low chime sounded as boarding completed. The cabin doors began to close. The plane exhaled as one. Helen stepped back. "We'll discuss this after pushback," she said. "For now, you will remain where you are." Grace watched her walk away again. This time the satisfaction was gone, replaced by tension. Outside the window, a black sedan rolled to a stop near the terminal, flanked by 2 airport vehicles. Grace did not see it. Not yet. She sat still, hands folded, eyes forward, heart steady. Around her, the plane felt smaller, like a room with no exits. Whatever this was, she knew one thing. It was no longer about a phone. The plane lurched forward with a low, mechanical groan, a sound that usually meant progress, but now felt like a warning. Grace felt the vibration through the seat before the seatbelt sign clicked on sharp and final. Around her, trays rattled softly. A conversation somewhere behind her cut off mid-sentence. The cabin shifted into that tense, contained stillness that came right before a flight surrendered itself to the air. Helen's voice came over the intercom, practiced and calm. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are preparing for departure. Please ensure all electronic devices are powered off and seatbelts are securely fastened." Grace did not look away from the window. The glass reflected her face, faintly pale under the cabin lights, eyes darker than usual. She could feel the attention now. Not loud, not obvious, but present, like pressure in a sealed room. The man beside her cleared his throat. "You should probably just do what they ask," he murmured without looking at her. His voice carried no malice, just fatigue. The sound of a man who had learned that peace came from staying out of trouble, even when trouble was wrong. Grace nodded once more to herself, then to him. "I am," she said. "I already did." He did not respond. The plane began to taxi. Outside, the runway lights slid past in long yellow streaks. Grace's phone felt heavier in her pocket now, like it carried something dangerous just by existing. She resisted the urge to touch it. Every instinct told her not to move. Movement could be framed as defiance. Stillness at least gave her time. Across the aisle, the woman in her early 30s finally spoke. Her voice was low, careful. "You okay?" she asked, eyes fixed on Grace's knee, not her face. Grace met her gaze. "Just for a second. I will be." The woman hesitated, then leaned back into her seat. She did not say anything else, but she did not look away this time. From the galley, Helen watched the first-class cabin with narrowed eyes. She told herself she was doing her job. She told herself that experience mattered, that instincts mattered, that if something felt wrong, it probably was. She did not name what that feeling was. She never did. She only trusted that it had kept her safe for decades. Still, something gnawed at her. The ticket had checked out. The name matched, no alerts, no errors. And yet the girl sat there, too calm, too composed, like someone used to rooms where adults argued quietly, but consequences were loud. Helen tapped her tablet again. "Nothing new." The cockpit door opened a few inches. Captain Reynolds leaned out his grey hair, neatly combed eyes, already tired. "Everything good back here?" he asked. Helen straightened instantly. "Minor issue," she said. "Passenger review. I've got it handled." Reynolds nodded, trusting. He always did. The system worked because people trusted it. "We're number 3 for takeoff," he said. "Let's keep it tight." As the door closed, Helen's jaw tightened. Tight was exactly what she intended. The plane slowed, then stopped. Engines idled. Grace felt the pause before acceleration, the moment when gravity decided which way it would lean. She breathed in through her nose, out through her mouth. 4 counts, then 4 again. That was when the announcement came. Not over the intercom, over the radio. A sharp crackle. A voice from the cockpit, no longer smooth. Ground. This is Flight 217. We've been instructed to hold position. The engines quieted further. The lights flickered once. Murmurs rippled through the cabin. Someone laughed nervously. What now? Grace's head turned toward the window. She saw it then. The black sedan. Closer now. Parked at an angle that made no sense for routine operations. 2 airport security vehicles idled beside it, lights not flashing, but unmistakably present. Her stomach tightened. Not fear. Recognition. The man beside her leaned forward, squinting. "That's odd," he said. Helen felt the shift immediately. Her tablet vibrated. A message flashed across the screen. Gate return. Authorized by operations. Her mouth went dry. The captain's voice came over the intercom again, this time without polish. "Ladies and gentlemen, we've been instructed to return to the gate due to an operational matter. Please remain seated." Operational. The word landed like a lie everyone agreed to pretend was true. Grace closed her eyes for a moment, then opened them. Her hands were steady. The woman across the aisle stared openly now. "What did you do?" she whispered, not accusing. Confused. Grace shook her head. "Nothing," she said. "I stayed where I was." The plane turned slowly, heavy on its wheels. The runway slid away. The terminal crept closer. Helen moved forward, pulse hammering. This was not protocol. This was not how reviews happened. She flagged the purser, a woman named Denise, who had flown longer than Helen, but spoken less over the years. "Do you know what this is?" Helen asked under her breath. Denise scanned the window, then the cabin. Her expression shifted. She said, "But I don't like it." The plane stopped at the gate with a dull thud. The seatbelt sign stayed on. The cabin doors remained closed. For 10 seconds, nothing happened. Then the jet bridge connected. The hollow clank echoed through the plane like a gavel. The door opened. A man stepped inside. He was tall, late 40s, wearing a dark jacket, not a suit, but tailored enough that it still spoke of money. His face was composed, almost calm, but his eyes were sharp, already scanning. Behind him came another man, broader with an earpiece, and a posture that filled space without apology. The cabin went silent. Helen recognized the second man first. She had seen him once, months ago, in a training video she barely remembered. Her throat closed. The first man's gaze landed on Grace. Not immediately. He took in the whole cabin first. The people, the silence, the tension that hung like a held breath. Then he looked at her. Grace stood before she realized she was moving. The seatbelt sign was still on. No one told her to sit. "Grace," the man said. He did not raise his voice. He did not need to. Her chest loosened. Just slightly. "Hi," she said. Helen felt the world tilt. The man took one step closer. Are you okay? Grace nodded once. They said there was a review. He looked away from her then, slowly, deliberately. His eyes found Helen. What kind of review, he asked. Helen opened her mouth. Nothing came out. Denise spoke instead. Sir, we were just ensuring compliance with safety regulations. The man's expression did not change, but something in the air did. Like pressure dropping before a storm. Compliance with what he asked. Exactly. Grace felt every eye in the cabin on her now, not judging, watching. Helen swallowed. There was a report, she said. Suspicious behavior. The man's gaze did not leave her. Define suspicious. Silence stretched. It felt endless. Finally, Helen said it. Not the words themselves, the truth beneath them. She didn't look like she belonged, she said too quietly, but not quiet enough. The man nodded once. Thank you for your honesty. He turned back to Grace. His voice softened. Did you call your mother? Grace shook her head. You told me not to argue, she said. A flicker crossed his face. Pride, pain. Something else, deeper. He straightened, then addressed the cabin. His voice carried now. Calm. Controlled. Ladies and gentlemen, he said, this flight will be delayed. I apologize for the inconvenience. No one complained. No one moved. He turned back to Helen. We'll continue this conversation, he said. Off the aircraft. Helen's knees weakened. Grace remained standing, shoulders squared, eyes forward. She did not smile. She did not cry. Whatever came next, she knew one thing. They were no longer pretending this was about rules. The jet bridge echoed with footsteps that did not rush. That alone unsettled everyone watching. Grace walked beside the man, now close enough to feel the calm radiating off him, not protective in a loud way, but absolute like gravity. Behind them, Helen followed her heels uneven, her breathing no longer controlled. Denise trailed last, face, pale eyes flicking to every phone, now openly raised. They did not go toward the terminal. The man turned left, away from the usual path, toward a glass corridor marked Authorized Personnel Only. An airport operations supervisor waited there, hands clasped so tightly his knuckles were white. Mr. Williams, the supervisor said, voice cracking slightly. We weren't expecting you in person. You weren't supposed to, the man replied. His voice was level, almost kind. That's the point. Grace recognized that tone, the one her mother used in court when the other side realized too late they had misread the room. They stopped. The glass walls reflected them back in fragments. A teenager in a hoodie. A man who did not look angry, but carried something heavier than anger. A flight attendant whose authority had evaporated and left only fear behind. Helen tried to speak. Sir, if there's been a misunderstanding. There hasn't, he said. Without raising his voice, he did not look at her. You were clear. The supervisor swallowed. We can move this conversation to my office. No, the man said. We'll have it here. Grace shifted her weight. She felt oddly detached, like she was watching a scene from above. Her heart beat steadily. She noticed details she would later remember. The way the fluorescent lights buzzed, the scuff on Helen's shoe, the way Denise's hands shook when she clasped them together. The man finally turned to Helen. "You flagged my daughter," he said. "On what basis?" Helen's mouth opened, closed, opened again. "There was a report," she said weakly. A passenger was concerned. Concerned about what? Helen glanced at Grace, then away. About safety. The man nodded slowly. "Safety," he repeated. That word gets used when people want cover. Grace felt his hand rest briefly on her shoulder. Not to shield her, to ground her. "Let's talk about facts," he said. "You verified her ticket." "Yes," Helen said. "It was valid." "You verified her identity." "Yes." "You had no alert from operations, no directive from the captain, no violation of policy." Helen's silence answered him. "So you escalated anyway," he continued. "You stopped the flight. You isolated a minor. You labeled her suspicious." Denise stepped forward, voice trembling. "Sir, we follow protocol." The man looked at her then. Really looked. "Protocol protects passengers," he said. "It does not replace judgment." The supervisor cleared his throat. "Mr. Williams, perhaps we should involve legal." The man's gaze flicked to him. Already done. Grace felt something tighten behind her eyes. Not tears. Relief. Helen's composure cracked. "I've been with this airline for over 20 years, she said. "I've seen people sneak into first class. Fake tickets, fake stories. I was just doing your job," the man finished. "That's what everyone says when they forget who the job is for." Grace spoke then. Her voice surprised even her. "You didn't ask me anything," she said. "You decided first." Helen flinched. The man turned to Grace. "Did you feel unsafe?" he asked gently before she spoke to you. Grace thought for a moment. "No." "And after?" Grace nodded. "Yes." That was enough. The supervisor shifted his stance. "Mr. Williams, with respect, grounding an aircraft has consequences. Delays, connections, media." The man's eyes hardened for the first time. "So does teaching my daughter that silence is the price of peace." Behind the glass, passengers pressed closer now. Phones were no longer hidden. A few murmurs leaked through the sealed corridor, indistinct, but charged. Helen's voice dropped to a whisper. "I didn't know who she was." The man met her eyes fully now. "That he said is the problem." A uniformed airport security officer approached, hesitant. "Sir, we've been instructed to assist." The man nodded. "Thank you. Please escort Ms. Moore to the operations office. She is relieved of duty pending investigation." Helen's face drained of color. "You can't do that," she said. "You're not, I am," he said simply. Denise gasped. "Sir." "You are not dismissed," he said to Denise, not unkindly. "You are witness." The officer placed a hand lightly on Helen's elbow. She did not resist. She did not speak again. As she was led away, she looked once at Grace. Not with anger. With something closer to disbelief. The man waited until she was gone. Then he exhaled slowly. The tension in his shoulders eased. He turned to Grace. "You did exactly what I hoped you would," he said. "You stayed calm. You told the truth. You didn't shrink." Grace felt her throat tighten. "I didn't know what else to do." "That's strength," he said. "Not knowing and choosing right anyway." The supervisor hesitated. "Mr. Williams, the flight crew will need time to reorganize." "That's fine," he said. "This flight will not leave without a full briefing." He turned back toward the aircraft. The jet bridge felt different now, wider, brighter. As they walked, Grace caught fragments of conversation behind the glass. "That's her. Who is he?" I knew something was off. One older man pressed his hand to the glass and nodded at Grace, slow and respectful. Inside the cabin, the atmosphere had shifted. The seats were the same. The air was not. When Grace stepped back inside, conversations stopped again. But this time it was not hostile. It was attentive. The man stood at the front of the cabin. He did not take the microphone. He did not need amplification. "My name is Daniel Williams," he said. "I am responsible for oversight of this airline safety and compliance operations." A ripple moved through the cabin. "My daughter boarded this flight legally," he continued. "She followed every rule. She was still treated as a problem." No one interrupted. "This flight will be delayed while we address that failure," he said. "If you choose to disembark, you may. If you stay, you will be treated with respect." No one moved. Grace returned to her seat. The man did not sit. He remained standing, a quiet presence at the front, like a sentry. The woman across the aisle leaned over. "You handled that better than most adults," she said softly. Grace nodded. "I didn't want to give them what they expected." The woman smiled, a sad, knowing smile. Neither did he. As the cabin settled into a strange, heavy calm, Grace looked out the window again. The black sedan was gone now. The security vehicles, too. What remained was something harder to erase, the knowledge that power did not always announce itself, and that sometimes it waited until it was forced to speak. The delay stretched from minutes into something heavier, the kind that pressed against the chest instead of the clock. Grace sat still, hands folded, watching the cabin recalibrate itself around the truth that had just entered it. Conversations restarted, but softer now. Measured. People spoke as if sound itself might carry consequences. Daniel remained standing near the bulkhead arms, relaxed at his sides, eyes scanning without urgency. He did not pace. He did not fidget. That alone unsettled the crew more than anger ever could. Denise hovered near the galley, fielding quiet questions from a junior attendant whose hands would not stop shaking. In row 3, an older man leaned toward his wife. "That girl's got more backbone than half the boardrooms I've sat in," he murmured. His wife nodded once, lips pressed tight, eyes never leaving Grace. Grace felt the weight of being seen in a different way now. Not as a problem, as a reference point. It made her uncomfortable. It made her proud. Both at once. The cockpit door opened again. Captain Reynolds stepped out, posture formal, face guarded. He stopped a few feet from Daniel. "Mr. Williams," he said, extending a hand. I wasn't informed you were joining us. Daniel shook it briefly. You weren't supposed to be, he said. This wasn't planned. Reynolds glanced toward Grace, then back. My understanding is that a crew member acted independently. That's rarely how it works, Daniel replied. Independent actions thrive in permissive environments. Reynolds's jaw tightened. We have procedures, yes, Daniel said, and cultures. One excuse is the other. The captain took a breath. We're already trending internally, he said quietly. Operations is fielding calls. This could escalate. Daniel's gaze flicked toward the windows, where several phones were now openly raised. A young man near the aisle held his device low, recording anyway. Daniel did not address him. It already has, he said. What matters is how you respond. Reynolds nodded slowly. What are you asking for? A statement, Daniel said. To this cabin. From you. The captain hesitated. He had commanded aircraft through storms, mechanical failures, medical emergencies. This felt different. This required judgment without altitude. All right, he said finally. He turned toward the cabin, cleared his throat. Ladies and gentlemen, he began, voice steady. I want to acknowledge a failure that occurred prior to departure. A passenger was treated in a way that does not reflect our standards or our values. The silence was complete. We are addressing it? Reynolds continued. Personally. Grace felt a hand brush her shoulder again. Daniel did not look at her this time. He was watching the cabin, measuring. The captain finished and stepped back. The tension did not vanish. It shifted, from accusation to anticipation. Denise approached Daniel, voice low. Legal is requesting a briefing, she said. They're asking if we should cancel the flight. Daniel considered it. No, he said. We fly. She nodded, relieved and terrified at once. Grace leaned back, finally allowing herself to breathe. Her phone vibrated softly in her pocket. She did not reach for it. Not yet. Across the aisle, the woman in her 30s leaned closer. Your dad, she said, choosing the word carefully. He's intense. Grace smiled faintly. He listens more than people think. The woman nodded. That's usually the dangerous kind. In the galley, a junior attendant whispered to Denise. What happens to Helen? Denise did not answer right away. She watched Daniel instead. That depends, she said finally, on what she admits. Minutes later, the cabin door opened again. Not with ceremony. Quiet. 2 airline executives stepped in. Suits, crisp expressions strained. One of them, a woman with silver hair, pulled into a low knot, stopped short when she saw Daniel. Daniel, she said. You didn't tell us. He turned. I didn't need permission. She sighed. This complicates things. It clarifies them, he replied. She glanced toward Grace, her eyes softening. I'm sorry, she said, not to Daniel. To Grace. Grace nodded. She did not speak. The executive straightened. We'll need statements. From crew, from passengers. Daniel nodded. You'll get her them. And the media. Daniel's expression hardened. They'll get the truth. The woman hesitated. That can be messy. Messy is manageable, he said. Silence is not. As the executives retreated to confer with the captain, a ripple of conversation broke out. Not gossip, reflection. People spoke of things they had seen, things they had let pass. A retired teacher spoke about a student she hadn't defended years ago. A contractor talked about a meeting he'd stayed quiet in, because it wasn't his turn to be uncomfortable. Grace listened. She felt the story stretching beyond her, that both comforted and scared her. Her phone vibrated again. This time she took it out. A single message from her mother. "I'm watching. Are you safe?" Grace typed back. "I am." She hesitated, then added, "Dad's here." 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. Then I know. Grace slipped the phone away. The engines began to hum louder. Pre-flight checks resumed. The flight attendants moved with renewed precision, their smiles different. Now, less forced, more aware. Denise approached Grace's row. She crouched, slightly lowering herself to eye level. "If you need anything," she said, "you ask for me." Grace nodded. "Thank you." As Denise stood, she paused. "For what it's worth," she added, "I should have said something sooner." Grace met her eyes. "You did," she said. "Eventually." Denise absorbed that. It hurt. It helped. The seatbelt sign chimed again. This time, it felt earned. Daniel finally sat down, but not in a seat. He took the jump seat near the galley facing the cabin. Watching. Listening. Not relaxing. Grace looked out the window as the plane began to move once more. The runway lights blurred. Her reflection stared back at her, steadier now. She thought about how close it had come to ending differently. How easily this could have been another story no one heard. Another quiet compromise, swallowed and forgotten. The plane accelerated. The nose lifted. Gravity pressed her back. As the ground fell away, Grace felt something else rise in its place. Not triumph, responsibility. Because now she knew. Power did not always protect you. But when it did, it asked something in return. And somewhere behind her, as the wheels left the earth, Daniel watched his daughter stare, unblinking into the sky, and understood that whatever came next would not be simple. It would be necessary. The cabin lights dimmed to a softer glow as the plane leveled off, the subtle shift in pressure settling into something almost peaceful. Almost. Grace stared at the tray table without seeing it. The hum of the engines, steady now, like a held breath finally released. Around her first class had returned to motion, but not to normal. Nothing was normal anymore. People spoke in low tones, glancing toward the front, as if the story might change again if they looked away too long. Daniel sat in the jump seat, one arm braced against the wall, eyes closed for a brief moment. Not resting. Recalibrating. He opened them when he felt it, that subtle pull of attention, and looked straight at Grace. She met his gaze. He nodded once. That was all. It was enough. Across the aisle, the woman in her 30s leaned forward again. "I keep thinking," she said quietly, "about my son. He's about your age." She paused. "I hope he would have handled it like you did." Grace offered a small smile. "I hope he won't have to." The woman exhaled a sound halfway between a laugh and a sigh. She leaned back, eyes shiny. A flight attendant approached with a tray, movements careful, almost reverent. "Miss Williams," she said, voice gentle. "Can I get you something to drink?" Grace looked up. For a split second, she saw the hesitation behind the politeness, the awareness of being watched. "Water's fine," she said. The attendant nodded quickly and moved on. Behind her, Denise stood near the galley arms, crossed, gaze thoughtful. She was not watching Grace anymore. She was watching the system she had spent her life inside, seeing its seams for the first time. A few rows back, a man with a neatly trimmed white beard leaned into the aisle. "Young lady," he said, raising his voice just enough to carry. Grace turned. "Yes, sir." He cleared his throat. "I flew combat missions for 20 years. Learned a lot about courage. Most of it had nothing to do with shouting." He tapped his chest once. "You did good." Grace swallowed. "Thank you." Several heads nodded. One woman pressed her lips together, blinking rapidly. Someone clapped once, softly, then stopped. The moment passed, but it left a mark. In the cockpit, Captain Reynolds adjusted his headset, eyes flicking to the instruments, and then to the jump seat monitor. "You comfortable back there?" he asked, keeping his voice neutral. Daniel's voice came back, calm. "I'm where I need to be." Reynolds nodded. He had been flying long enough to recognize that tone, the kind that didn't ask for agreement. As the plane cut through the clouds, the world outside faded to white. Inside, the story deepened. Passengers began to speak to one another, not about connections or meetings, but about things they usually saved for later. A grandmother talked about her first job, and the day she learned to keep her head down. A middle-aged man admitted he'd once reported a co-worker for something he knew wasn't true, just to stay in favor. Each confession landed softly, like something set down after being carried too long. Grace listened. She did not comment. She absorbed. Her phone buzzed again. A message from her mother. "Proud of you. No matter what happens next." Grace typed back slowly. "I think something is happening whether we want it or not." 3 dots appeared. Then that's how it always starts. The aisle quieted as one of the airline executives returned, walking carefully, as if the cabin were a room where people were grieving. She stopped near Daniel. "We've issued a preliminary statement," she said quietly, acknowledging the incident. "Promising review." Daniel looked at her. "Words matter," he said, "but timing matters more." She nodded. "There are calls coming in. Sponsors, advocacy groups, former employees, and current ones," Daniel said. She hesitated. "Yes?" Grace watched the exchange with a strange detachment. It felt like standing at the edge of a river she hadn't known she was about to cross. The executive turned to leave, then paused. "Grace," she said. Grace looked up. "I'm sorry you were put in that position." Grace considered her. The suit, the careful expression, the sincerity that was trying to find its footing. "I'm sorry it took this long for it to matter," Grace said gently. The executive nodded once. She did not defend herself. Time moved differently now. The plane felt like a suspended space cut off from the world below, but shaping it all the same. Somewhere over the Midwest, turbulence rattled the cabin briefly. Grace's hand tightened on the armrest. Daniel's eyes flicked to her, instinctive. The shaking passed. Later, as meals were served, no one rushed. Even hunger felt secondary. Denise moved through the rows, checking on passengers, pausing longer than usual. When she reached Grace, she stopped. "I've been thinking," she said quietly, "about all the times I told myself it wasn't my place." Grace met her gaze. "It is," she said. "It always is." Denise nodded, eyes wet. "I know that now." As the hours passed, phones lit up across the cabin. Notifications stacked. Headlines formed. Grace did not look. She did not need to. She could feel it. The shift, the way the story was escaping the aircraft, growing legs, finding ears. A young man near the back leaned forward, whispering to his seatmate. "My sister's gonna see this," he said. "She's 15. She hates flying." His seatmate replied, "Maybe she won't as much after this." Grace stared out the window again. The clouds had thinned. The sky deepened to a darker blue. She felt older than she had that morning. Not in years. In weight. Daniel stood and stretched, then moved to sit beside her for the first time since takeoff. The seat creaked softly. He looked straight ahead. "You didn't have to answer any of them," he said. "I wanted to," Grace replied. He nodded. "I know." She hesitated. "Is this going to get worse?" Daniel considered. "Yes." Grace absorbed that. "And better." "Yes," he said again. "Eventually." She leaned back, eyes closing briefly. "I don't want to be a symbol," she said. "I just wanted to get on a plane." Daniel's voice softened. "Most people who change things didn't ask to," he said. "They just refused to disappear." Grace opened her eyes. Outside, the sun dipped lower, painting the clouds gold. She watched the light shift, felt the plane move steadily forward. Whatever waited on the ground, she knew this much. The flight had already crossed a point of no return, and she was still in her seat. The first jolt of descent came without warning, a subtle drop that lifted stomachs and quieted conversations at once. Grace felt it before the announcement, the way the engines shifted pitch, the way the cabin leaned forward as if bracing for what waited below. The sky outside had darkened to the color of old steel. Somewhere, beneath the clouds, a city prepared to receive them. Daniel's posture changed. Not tense. Focused, he checked his watch, then glanced toward the aisle where Denise stood speaking quietly into a handset. The words were lost to the hum, but the urgency was not. Denise nodded twice, then met Daniel's eyes and gave a single, sober nod in return. Grace noticed. She always noticed. "What is it?" she asked. Daniel did not answer right away. He watched the cabin the way people instinctively reached for armrests, for routines, for the illusion of normal arrival. "There are people waiting," he said finally. Grace's pulse quickened. "Media?" "Yes." She exhaled slowly. "And others." Daniel nodded. "And others." The captain's voice came over the intercom, steady, but edged with fatigue. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are beginning our descent. Please return to your seats and ensure seatbelts are fastened." Seatbelts clicked in unison. The sound felt ceremonial now. Binding. Across the aisle, the woman in her 30s, leaned closer. "Whatever happens," she said softly, "you don't owe anyone anything." Grace appreciated the kindness. She also knew it wasn't entirely true. "I know," she said, "but I might say something anyway." The woman smiled, tight and proud. As the plane sank through cloud cover, the cabin lights brightened automatically. Faces sharpened. Lines appeared where there had been shadow. Grace caught her reflection in the window again, clearer now. She looked different, not changed, revealed. Her phone vibrated once more. A new message, from an unknown number. "We're on the ground. They're asking questions." Grace showed it to Daniel. He read it, expression unreadable. "Your mother," he said. "She's with legal." Grace nodded. "I figured." The plane banked gently. City lights appeared through the thinning clouds, scattered constellations of yellow and white. Grace felt a strange calm settle over her, the kind that came not from certainty, but from acceptance. The wheels hit the runway with a firm, decisive thump. Applause rippled briefly, then died out. This landing felt different. Not an ending, a beginning. As the plane taxied, Denise approached, voice low. "Ground security is in place," she said. "They're holding the gate." Daniel stood. "Thank you." Grace rose with him. The seatbelt sign was still on. No one objected. People watched them now without hiding it. Not hungry, not tired, intent. The plane stopped. Engines powered down. Silence returned, heavy and expectant. The door opened. Noise rushed in. Voices. Shutters, a wave of sound that pressed forward, restrained only by the narrow bridge. Grace flinched instinctively, then steadied herself. Daniel placed a hand at the small of her back. Not guiding, supporting. "Stay close," he said. "Speak only if you want to." Grace nodded. "I know." They stepped into the jet bridge together. The crowd beyond the glass surged forward, held back by a line of security officers. Microphones rose. Cameras clicked. Names were shouted. Questions collided in the air, overlapping, urgent, hungry. "Grace, over here. Is it true you were detained?" Daniel Williams' comment on the incident. Was this discrimination? Are there going to be resignations? Grace felt the sound wash over her, like water. She focused on one thing. Her breath. In. Out. Daniel raised a hand. The noise did not stop immediately. It slowed, like a wave meeting a breakwater. "We will release a statement," he said, voice carrying without effort. "Today." A reporter pushed forward. "Is it true the flight attendant was removed mid-flight?" Daniel's eyes held steady. "It is true that actions have consequences." Grace felt every camera turn toward her. Another voice cut through. Older. Measured. "Grace, how did it feel?" She did not answer right away. She scanned the faces. Some curious, some sympathetic, some calculating. She saw a teenage girl near the back, phone, held too high, eyes wide. It felt, Grace said finally, like being told I didn't belong in a space, I followed the rules to enter. The crowd stilled, not silent, attentive. And now the reporter pressed, "How does it feel now?" Grace considered the question. "It feels like people are listening," she said. "That's different." A murmur rippled through the press line. Security guided them forward. The terminal opened around them, bright and echoing. Travelers slowed. Some stopped entirely. Phones came out. Whispers followed. Near baggage claim, Grace spotted her mother. Tall, composed, hair pulled back tight. She stood flanked by 2 attorneys, but her eyes were on Grace alone. When they met, the world narrowed. Her mother did not run. She walked, steady, deliberate. She reached Grace and pulled her into a hug that held for exactly 3 seconds, long enough to ground, short enough to release. "You okay?" she asked. Grace nodded. "I am." Her mother stepped back, hands on Grace's shoulders, searching her face. "You don't have to say anything else," she said. Grace glanced back toward the cameras, then back at her parents. "I want to," she said quietly. Her mother studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "Then we do it right." They moved to a quieter corner, away from the rush. Security formed a loose barrier. The noise dimmed. Not gone. Controlled. Grace stepped forward. She could feel her heart beat in her throat now. She swallowed. The words came anyway. "I didn't plan to be here," she said. "I planned to get on a plane. I followed the rules. I stayed calm. I was still treated like a problem." She paused. The cameras did not move. "This isn't about one flight," she continued, "or one airline. It's about how quickly we decide who deserves patience and who doesn't." A reporter raised a hand. Grace did not stop. "I'm not angry," she said. "I'm aware. And I think a lot of people are too." Silence followed. Then questions, again louder now. But Grace had said what she needed. Daniel stepped forward, reclaiming the space. "That's all for now," he said. "We appreciate your time." They moved away as the noise surged behind them. Toward an exit marked authorized only. Toward vehicles waiting with engines running. As they walked, Grace felt the weight lift just slightly. Not because it was over. Because it had been carried. Outside, the air was cool, clean. The city breathed around them unaware and affected all at once. Grace looked back at the terminal at the people pressing against glass. She did not wave. She did not hide. Whatever came next would come. But she had landed on her feet, and the ground at last was listening. Morning arrived without ceremony. Grace woke to the sound of traffic far below the hotel window, a low, constant rush that reminded her the world had not paused just because she had spoken into a microphone the night before. Her phone lay on the nightstand screen, dark, finally still, after hours of vibration. She did not reach for it. Not yet. Down the hall she could hear her parents' voices, muted but tense. Not arguing, strategizing. The sound of adults deciding how to move through a day that had already decided something about them. Grace sat up slowly, feet touching the carpet, grounding herself. The room smelled faintly of coffee and clean linen. Ordinary. She welcomed that. By the time she joined them in the small sitting area, Daniel was already dressed, jacket on tie, loosened. Her mother sat at the table, laptop open, reading silently, jaw set. She looked up when Grace entered. "How do you feel?" she asked. Grace considered. "Tired," she said. "Clear." Her mother nodded. "That's about right." Daniel poured coffee into a paper cup, then stopped watching the liquid settle. "There's a board call in 40 minutes, he said. Then a press briefing. Grace leaned against the door frame. "About the airline. And about you," her mother added gently. Grace exhaled. "I don't want to be everywhere." Daniel met her eyes. "You won't be," he said. "We control that." A knock came at the door. 2 short taps. Professional. Daniel opened it to reveal a hotel security officer. "There's a group downstairs," the officer said. "Media, and a few others." "Others," Grace repeated. The officer hesitated. "Community leaders, advocacy groups, a couple of school administrators." Her mother closed the laptop. That didn't take long. Daniel thanked the officer and closed the door. Silence settled again. Grace spoke first. "I don't want to hide," she said. "But I don't want to perform." Her mother studied her. "Then don't," she said. "You decide the terms." Daniel nodded. "We'll do one thing," he said. "One appearance. Then we pull back." Grace thought about the teenage girl she'd seen in the terminal, the way her eyes had followed her. Not worship, recognition. "All right," Grace said. "But I talk. Not a statement." Daniel smiled faintly. "I wouldn't expect anything else." They left through a side entrance. Even so, the noise found them. Voices rose. Cameras clicked. Someone called Grace's name not loudly, but with intention. They stopped just outside the hotel doors. The air was cool, sharp. Grace stepped forward before anyone could stop her. "I'm not doing interviews today," she said. Her voice carried calm and unshaken. "I just want to say one thing." The crowd quieted. "Not completely." "Enough. I didn't speak yesterday because I wanted attention." Grace continued. "I spoke because staying quiet would have taught me something I don't want to learn." A few heads nodded. "I'm 16, she said. "I'm still figuring things out. But I know this. When something feels wrong, it usually is. And when we all pretend not to notice, that's how it stays wrong." She paused. The silence held. "That's it," she said. "Thank you." She stepped back. Daniel placed a hand lightly on her shoulder. They moved toward the waiting car as the noise swelled again behind them, louder now, but less sharp. The questions had lost some of their teeth. Inside the car, Grace leaned her head back and closed her eyes. Her mother reached over and squeezed her hand once. No words, none needed. The drive took them across the city past neighborhoods, waking up people walking dogs, opening shop living lives untouched by press briefings and board calls. Grace watched it all feeling strangely separate and deeply connected at the same time. At a red light, her phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "Thank you for saying what my daughter couldn't." Grace stared at it for a long moment, then typed back, "I hope she never has to." The day unfolded in fragments. Daniel disappeared into meetings. Her mother took calls that grew sharper, then calmer, then strategic. Grace sat in a quiet conference room, with a notebook sketching absently lines forming shapes she didn't fully intend. In the early afternoon, Denise appeared at the door. She looked different, tired, determined. "I hope it's okay I came," Denise said. Grace stood. "Of course." Denise clasped her hands together. "I resigned this morning," she said. "Not because anyone asked, because I realized I didn't want to wait until someone did." Grace nodded. "What will you do?" Denise smiled, small but real. "I don't know. But I'll know it's mine." They talked for a few minutes, not about the flight, about families, about routines, about the strange relief that comes when you stop pretending. After Denise left, Grace returned to her sketchbook. She drew the inside of a plane cabin. Not dramatic, not heroic. Just rows of seats, a narrow aisle light coming in through one window. In the foreground, a girl sat upright, hands folded, eyes forward. Not small, not large, just present. That evening, as the city lights came on, one by one, Grace stood by the window again. Her phone buzzed less now. The noise had shifted elsewhere. New headlines, new stories. Daniel joined her, loosening his tie. "You changed the tone," he said. Grace didn't look at him. "I just told the truth." He nodded. "That's what does it." She turned then. "Is it over?" Daniel shook his head. "No," he said. "But it started." Grace considered that. Outside, traffic flowed indifferent and constant. She picked up her sketchbook again, turned to a fresh page. Tomorrow the world would move on. She would go back to school, back to homework and deadlines and quiet moments when no one was watching. But something would remain. A line crossed, a habit broken. Grace pressed her pencil to the page and began to draw steady and sure, knowing that whatever came next, she would not disappear to make it easier for anyone else to look away. The school hallway smelled like disinfectant and old paper, a scent so familiar it almost felt unreal after the polished quiet of conference rooms and hotel lobbies. Grace stood just inside the front doors. Backpack slung over one shoulder, listening to lockers slam and sneakers squeak against the floor. The bell hadn't rung yet. The building was awake, but not fully alert, like a body stretching before a long day. No cameras, no microphones, just faces. She took a step forward, then another. A few heads turned, a few didn't. That was new. Normally she blended. Today the looks lingered a second too long, then slipped away, unsure of what to do with her. At the trophy case near the main office, a group of juniors huddled close, whispering. One of them, a boy with messy hair and a varsity jacket, nudged another and tilted his chin toward Grace. Their voices dropped. Grace didn't slow down. She reached her locker and spun the dial. The metal clicked open. The sound grounded her. "Hey." Grace turned. It was Mrs. Adler, her history teacher. Late 50s, sensible shoes, a face lined by years of watching students learn and fail and try again. She held a stack of papers against her chest like a shield. "I just wanted to say," Mrs. Adler began, then stopped. She seemed to choose her words carefully. "What you did took courage." Grace nodded. "Thank you." Mrs. Adler hesitated. "Some of us are still learning what that looks like." Grace watched her for a moment. "We all are," she said. The bell rang. The hallway surged. In first period, Grace slid into her seat near the window. The classroom buzzed with the low hum of anticipation. Phones were tucked away, but not forgotten. She could feel questions pressing against the backs of eyes. Mr. Reynolds, the substitute filling in for a teacher on leave, cleared his throat. "Before we start," he said, adjusting his glasses, "I want to remind everyone that this classroom is a place of respect." A few students glanced at Grace. She kept her gaze on her notebook. "If you have questions," Mr. Reynolds continued, "ask them appropriately. If you have opinions, express them thoughtfully. And if you don't know what to say, it's okay to listen." The class settled. Not perfectly. Enough. As he turned to the board, a folded note landed on Grace's desk. She stared at it for a second, then unfolded it. "I'm glad you said something. I wish I had. No name." Grace folded the paper and slipped it into her pocket. At lunch, the cafeteria felt louder than usual. Trays clattered. Laughter spiked, then dipped. Grace stood in line, scanning the menu without really seeing it. Someone behind her shifted nervously. "I saw the video," a girl said suddenly. "My mom made me watch it." Grace turned. The girl was younger, maybe 14, braces flashing when she spoke. She said she would have lost it. The girl continued. "But you didn't." Grace smiled faintly. "I wanted to." The girl nodded, understanding more than her words suggested. "I'm Emily," she said. "If you ever want to sit with us." Grace thanked her and moved on. She chose a table near the window, sat alone, and opened her sketchbook. The cafeteria noise faded as she focused on lines and shadows. A hand appeared on the table. "Mind if I sit?" a voice asked. Grace looked up. It was Marcus Lee, senior class president. Polite, careful, known for saying the right thing at the right time. He gestured to the empty seat. "Sure," Grace said. He sat setting his tray down. "There's a student forum after school," he said. "Administration wants to talk about inclusion. They asked if you'd speak." Grace didn't look up from her sketch. "I'm not a spokesperson," Marcus nodded. "I figured you'd say that." He paused. "But sometimes being there changes the room, even if you don't say much." Grace considered that. "I'll think about it." The afternoon passed in fragments. Math problems, essays, the ordinary weight of assignments pressing back into place. It felt almost comforting, the return of expectations that didn't involve moral clarity. After the final bell, Grace stood outside the auditorium doors. Voices drifted from inside. Adults, students, the hum of chairs being arranged. Her phone buzzed, a message from her mother. No pressure, just you. Grace inhaled, exhaled, then pushed the door open. The room quieted as she entered. Not immediately, gradually. Conversations trailed off. A few people turned fully in their seats. Grace walked to the back row and sat. She did not take the stage. The principal cleared her throat. "Thank you all for coming," she said. "We're here to listen." The discussion began cautiously. Students spoke about dress codes, about being followed in stores, about teachers who assumed and classmates who dismissed. Parents shifted uncomfortably. Teachers nodded, some surprised, some not. Grace listened. Her chest tightened at familiar stories. Different details. Same shape. Halfway through, a woman near the front turned around. "Grace," she said, "would you like to share?" The room stilled. Grace stood slowly. She did not move toward the front. She stayed where she was. "I didn't come to speak," she said. "I came to hear if anything would change." A murmur rippled. "I don't need apologies," Grace continued. "I need consistency. I need people to notice before someone has to make it public." She looked around. "I don't want this to be about me. I want it to be about the next person who doesn't have a camera or a parent in the room." Silence followed. Then nods. Then someone clapped. Not loudly. Not performative. Real. Grace sat back down. After the meeting, people approached her in ones and twos. Some thanked her. Some cried. Some said nothing, but met her eyes and held them a second longer than before. Outside, the sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the parking lot. Grace walked home instead of waiting for a ride. She needed the movement. Her phone buzzed again. A message from Daniel. "Proud of you." Dinner later, Grace typed back. "Walking home. See you." She passed houses she'd known her whole life. Lawns trimmed, flags waving. A man watering his garden paused and waved. Grace waved back. At home, she kicked off her shoes and dropped her backpack by the door. The house was quiet. She sat at the kitchen table and opened her sketchbook again. This time, she drew the school hallway. Lockers, fluorescent lights, students mid-stride. In the corner, barely noticeable, a girl walking forward, head level, not looking left or right. Grace closed the book. The world had not transformed overnight. People still whispered, still hesitated, still chose comfort when they could. But something had shifted, subtle, persistent. Grace knew now that change didn't always arrive as a roar. Sometimes it sounded like footsteps in a hallway, steady and unafraid, moving forward, even when no one was sure what would happen next. The hearing room smelled like old wood and polished metal, the kind of place where voices learned to behave before words ever did. Grace sat in the second row, hands folded in her lap, feet flat on the floor. She wore a simple navy dress her mother had picked out that morning. Not for appearances, for grounding. This room demanded steadiness. At the front, a long table faced a raised dais. Nameplates caught the light. Regulators, board members, people whose signatures moved systems quietly, efficiently, without spectacle. Cameras were allowed, but only a few. No shouting, no pushing. Just lenses waiting. Daniel sat one row ahead of her, posture straight, eyes forward. He had testified earlier. Calm. Precise. He had spoken about policy gaps, training failures, accountability. He had not mentioned Grace until asked. When he did, his voice had not changed. Now it was her turn. The chairwoman adjusted her glasses. "Grace Williams," she said. "Thank you for being here." Grace stood. The microphone was fixed too high, then adjusted down by a staffer who avoided her eyes. Grace didn't mind. She had learned that small discomforts often revealed larger truths. "Please state your name for the record," the chairwoman said. "Grace Williams." Grace replied. Her voice carried. not loud. Clear. "You may begin," the chairwoman said. Grace took a breath. She did not read from notes. "I didn't come here to accuse anyone," she said. "I came here to explain what it feels like when a system decides you're a risk before you've done anything wrong." A few heads lifted. "I followed the rules." Grace continued. "I stayed calm. I answered questions. None of that stopped what happened, because the decision had already been made." She paused, letting the words settle. "I want to be clear," she said. "I don't believe every person involved intended harm, but impact doesn't wait for intent. It just happens." A man on the dais shifted. Another leaned back, folding his arms. "When I was asked to leave my seat, Grace said I felt something I think a lot of people feel but don't always name. I felt like the room had decided who I was before I spoke." She looked up then, meeting eyes. "That doesn't just happen on planes?" The chairwoman nodded slowly. "Thank you," she said. "Do you believe policy changes can address this?" Grace considered. "Policies matter," she said, "but culture decides how they're used." A murmur rippled through the room. "What would you change?" another board member asked. Grace did not answer immediately. She thought of Denise, of Mrs. Adler, of the woman in the cafeteria. "I would change who gets believed first," she said. Silence followed. Then pens moved. Notes were taken. "Thank you," the chairwoman said again. "You may step down." Grace returned to her seat, heart steady. Daniel glanced back, pride flickering across his face before he masked it. Her mother squeezed her hand, once discreet and firm. As the hearing adjourned, conversations erupted in hushed clusters. Grace remained seated until the room thinned. She watched people leave, each carrying their version of what they'd heard. In the hallway, a man approached her. Late 60s, silver hair, navy blazer. He extended a hand. "I chaired a committee like this once," he said. "We didn't listen enough." Grace shook his hand. "You're listening now." He smiled, thin and grateful. Outside the steps of the building, baked under afternoon sun, a few reporters waited, restrained by rope and expectation. Grace stopped at the top step. "I'm not answering questions today," she said, voice carrying just enough. "But I hope you're right about what happens next." Someone asked, "Do you feel vindicated?" Grace shook her head. "I feel responsible," she said. "There's a difference." She walked away before anyone could reframe that for her. That evening, the house was quiet again. Familiar. Safe. Grace kicked off her shoes and sat on the living room floor, back against the couch. Daniel joined her, lowering himself carefully. "You did well," he said. Grace tilted her head back, staring at the ceiling. "I said what I meant." "That's what I meant," he replied. She hesitated. "I keep thinking about the people who don't get to leave rooms like that." Daniel nodded. "That's why rooms like that matter." Her phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "My son watched the hearing with me. He asked why you were brave. I told him bravery looks like telling the truth when it costs you comfort." Grace swallowed. She typed back. "Tell him bravery also looks like listening." Night settled in. The world outside quieted, but not completely. Somewhere, stories were being edited. Decisions drafted. Training manuals reconsidered. Somewhere else, nothing changed at all. Grace opened her sketchbook one last time that day. She drew the hearing room, the long table, the raised dais. In the center, a microphone angled slightly down. Empty now. Waiting. She closed the book and set it aside. Tomorrow would bring more questions, more expectations, more chances to step forward or step back. Grace turned off the light and lay still, listening to the house breathe. She did not feel finished. She felt ready. Because the hardest part was never speaking in public. It was deciding quietly, not to let the world tell you who you were before you had the chance to say it yourself. The morning the policy changes were announced, Grace was already on the bus to school, earbuds in notebook balanced on her knee. The city slid past the window in familiar blocks of brick and glass. Nothing about the street looked different. That was the strange part. The world rarely signaled when it adjusted its spine. Her phone buzzed once. A message from her mother. It's official. Training overhaul. Independent review board. Mandatory reporting with consequences. No exemptions. Grace closed her eyes for a moment. Not in celebration, in recognition. Systems did not transform because of one voice. They shifted because enough people decided not to look away at the same time. She had been one of those people. That mattered. It didn't make her special. It made her responsible. At school, the day unfolded like any other. Pop quizzes, group projects, the low-grade drama of lockers and lunch lines. A few teachers met her eyes longer than usual. A few students nodded in passing. No applause, no tension, just continuity. That felt right. In civics class, Mr. Patel paused mid-lecture and wrote a single word on the board. Accountability. He didn't look at Grace when he did it. He didn't have to. The class leaned forward anyway. That afternoon, Grace walked home alone. The air had the clean bite of early fall. Leaves skittered along the sidewalk. She passed the corner store where the owner waved and called her by name. She waved back, ordinary, and seen at the same time. At home, Daniel sat at the kitchen table with papers spread out, sleeves rolled up. He looked up as she entered. "They're going to fight parts of it," he said. "They always do." Grace dropped her backpack and poured herself a glass of water. "That's fine," she said. "They know they're being watched." Daniel smiled, small and tired. "You learned faster than I did." Grace shrugged. "I didn't have a choice." That evening, they ate together, the three of them, talking about school and schedules and nothing that would make headlines. Grace's mother asked about a math test. Daniel complained about traffic. The normalcy felt earned. Later, Grace retreated to her room and opened her sketchbook. She turned past drawings of cabins and hallways and hearing rooms. She stopped on a blank page. The pencil hovered, then moved. She drew a bus stop, a classroom, a kitchen table, ordinary spaces. In each a figure stood upright, not dominant, not diminished, just present. The same posture in every scene, consistent, unmoved by context. She closed the book. Weeks passed. The noise faded. New stories took its place. But traces remained. Denise sent a message about starting a training non-profit with former crew members. Mrs. Adler emailed to say the curriculum committee had approved new material. The woman from the cafeteria wrote to say her daughter had joined the debate team. Grace read every message. She didn't answer all of them. She learned that choosing where to give energy was part of the work. On a quiet Sunday afternoon, Grace and Daniel sat on the front steps watching the neighborhood move. A delivery truck rumbled by. Kids rode bikes, shouting. Somewhere a radio played softly through an open window. Daniel broke the silence. "You know, he said there will be people who say this only happened because of who I am." Grace didn't look at him. "They're wrong," she said. "It happened because people saw themselves in it." He nodded. "Still, you'll hear it." Grace leaned back against the railing. "They can think whatever they want," she said. "It doesn't change what I did." Daniel studied her pride and worry braided together. "That confidence," he said. "Protect it." Grace smiled. "I will." That night she posted one thing. No press release, no statement, just a drawing. The ordinate bases, the upright figures, a simple caption, "Still here." The response came quietly. Likes, shares, messages from people who recognized themselves in the lines. Grace put the phone down and turned off the light. She slept deeply. In the months that followed, life continued to layer itself over the moment that had changed its direction. Grace applied to colleges. She argued with friends. She failed a quiz and laughed about it later. She learned that impact didn't exempt you from being human. It demanded it. On the anniversary of the flight, Grace boarded another plane. Different airline, different city. She sat in economy this time by choice. The seat was narrow. The window scratched. She didn't mind. A woman across the aisle struggled with her bag. Grace stood and helped without thinking. The woman thanked her, surprised, grateful. Grace smiled and sat back down. As the plane lifted into the sky, Grace watched the ground fall away again. Not with tension, with trust. The story had never been about where she sat. It had been about how she stood. If this story stayed with you, if you believe moments like this matter, even when the cameras are gone, take a second to like this story, subscribe for more, and comment. Stand your ground.